Good afternoon. This is Glenn Maurer. I'm the host today on The Next Step with Bud Booth and Dennis Apel. And we're going to revisit a program we did a few weeks ago with Dennis involving the peace or anti-nuclear or other demonstrations that he and others, Bud and he are both participant in over the years out at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which recently became attended to by the U.S. Supreme Court in an unfortunate decision, I might say, that knocked down one of the arguments that Dennis and his lawyers had raised on the being arrested inside of the technical boundaries of the Vandenberg Air Force Base, but alongside a public highway in an area that was marked for public demonstration. And the U.S. Supreme Court was given the issue out of the Ninth Circuit, where the Ninth Circuit had ruled that the Air Force commander did not have the right to ban and bar or restrict people from that space because it was a public easement and open to the general public. There also was an issue raised about the First Amendment rights, but the Ninth Circuit had simply ruled that the easement prohibited or restricted the exercise of the jurisdiction of the commandant, if I have this correctly. And the U.S. Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, ruled against the argument that the Ninth Circuit had found probative and remanded the case back to the Ninth Circuit for further proceedings. So Dennis and his lawyer will be back in the Ninth Circuit soon to discuss that. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yes.
So tell us what issues you hope to raise on the second time around before the lower court.
Well, the first time around we raised two issues. One had to do with the statute itself, the trespassing statute, and the second had to do with the First Amendment.
Right.
When the Ninth Circuit ruled in my case, they only ruled on the statute element. They didn't make a ruling on the First Amendment.
Well, in reading the decision, reading both the decisions, the Ninth Circuit, the first decision, as I understood it, the Ninth Circuit simply said, we've already ruled on this in another case, a demonstrator named Robert Parker.
Correct.
And
Hobart Parker.
For the same reasons that we rejected reversed the conviction in that case, we do it in your case.
Correct.
So they didn't actually speak to the First Amendment issue because they didn't need to.
Correct.
The Supreme Court, just as a rule of general judicial process, they try not to bite off constitutional issues if they can limit their decisions to statutory or factual determinations.
Right.
So
basically what they're saying is that the jurisdictional boundaries of the base
Right.
are under complete control of the base commander, and he can use any excuse he wants or she wants to bar anybody from that. Right. And that flies right in the face of the First Amendment, but as Dennis has pointed out, the Supreme Court didn't talk to that.
Right. And I think this is, we'll go back and make sure that people understand the facts, because even the court went to to me, sort of unusual. They included as an appendix to the decision, they included a map of the boundaries of the base and showed where the highway bisects or transits the Vandenberg Air Force Base boundaries and how close it is to a public school and how this is used by the general public all the time, and even has a designated free speech area, so the only reason that they had to, well, two issues. One is they had the authority to ban you from future presence inside the base, right?
Yes.
Because of your you had 15 prior arrests?
Yeah, I had 18 prior arrests, but 15 were just for standing with my sign.
Okay.
3 of them were for legitimate acts of civil disobedience.
And this is, and I want to have time to get into the point of this before the process sort of intrigues me as well. Anyway, I think the issue that we, as the general public, are affected by is that this is clearly an area open to the public for use by the public, this highway.
Yes.
And so hopefully when you go back before the Supreme Court or back before the Ninth Circuit, there'll be some mechanism to raise that question directly. Is that your expectation?
Yes. If I might, Glenn, the installation, Vandenberg Air Force Base installation, is very well defined. It's fenced, it has barricaded guardhouse. You can't get in or out of there without going through heavy security. The area outside that installation, which still is on property owned by Vandenberg, is open to the public. Right. So there's no real way for the public to understand that as a military base outside of the installation. Our contention in the statutory issue was that once you open a portion of a base up to the public, and it's open to the public 24/7 and not guarded or secured by the base, then the public has all the rights of the public in a public place. But the Supreme Court ruled basically that if the military owns that property, they can extend the rules and regulations they have on the installation to that property outside the installation as well.
Which validated the authority of the base commander to, under 1362 of the code, to ban people from being present in that space.
Correct.
So when you go back, the next question will be, since they've now recognized this as an area of public transit, public use, and it designated a free speech area, clearly a First Amendment issue,
Sure.
Can they ban people from that space for who are there to make their presence known or objections known to the purposes of the base?
Yeah, that's the question. So it now falls back to the First Amendment issue, and the famous case, USA versus Flower, held that a person, if they're on any portion of a base that's open to the public, they're allowed their First Amendment right in that space. And so the argument would be that my First Amendment right had been affected by my ouster from the protest area.
Well, good. And does you have the same attorney on that hearing?
I do. I have Erwin Chemerinsky, who's the dean of the law school at UC Irvine, but he's also a very well-known constitutional lawyer. So.
Right.
There's one other thing I might add. Vandenberg is they call it a secure military facility, as if it's such that nobody can get in. Now, it's, as I understand, the second largest military base in continental United States, and most of it is in wild growth, and you can get many places. You can get in and do things which many people have in the past. I went in 1983 with a group, my affinity group, and many other affinity groups, to try and get up to the missile launch sites just to demonstrate that this was not a secure base and that we had a right to, well, not a right to go there, but a right to protest what the military is doing there.
Well, why don't we talk about that a bit, because Dennis, this issue is compelling to you, obviously, and to you, Bud. And Bud, you've been participating in these protests for how long?
Well, a couple more months. I'm scheduled.
No, how long has historically?
I've 1983.
You begin.
It was in the winter of 1983 that a group of affinities groups actually tried to get in, and some did. Some got in as far as the missile sites.
This was
the
first
sites.
These were the first protests against the Vandenberg Air Force Base programs.
This was actually the second. There was a smaller group that went in, and they merely crossed near the main gate. Okay. And then the second, they organized a big one by telephone, no less. No modern means of doing it, just telephone.
Social media of the time. That's right.
What?
Social media of the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And yet we got.
And the issue that you and this original group of protesters or issues that you were raising was the use of a military base for weapons of war, atomic weaponry, or what was the specific issue?
That was it. We were opposed to what they were doing at Vandenberg, and this was a way of attempting to stop them from doing it, because we didn't think we were going to stop them, but we thought that we could call attention to the public that what is happening at Vandenberg.
American military policy.
Yeah, exactly.
And Dennis, when did you become involved in the actual presence on the demonstrations?
About 18 years ago.
Same time.
I had moved to the Central Coast, moved to Guadalupe, and Vandenberg, you know, when they test their ICBMs, it rattles the windows in our house. Guadalupe is very close to the northern end of the base. And so it seemed like a good place to get involved. The group that I'm with, Catholic Worker, has a history of resistance work. But,
And again, specifically, what are you objecting to, resisting? What is it? Is it just a peace against something that's a threat to peace, or something more specific?
Yeah, it would be anything, any part of the mission of Vandenberg Air Force Base that we would consider illegal or immoral. We started with ICBM testing because the ICBM is a delivery system for nuclear warheads. Nuclear warheads are certainly immoral and illegal under international law. And the testing of those ICBMs also causes a major problem for the people at the receiving end of those warheads. So every time they test the ICBM, the warhead lands in the lagoon at Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands.
You mean the ones that are just the dummy warheads, allegedly?
They call them dummy warheads, but in order to perform as a real warhead, they have depleted uranium. Depleted uranium is radioactive material with a half-life of 3.5 billion years. When that lands in Kwajalein Atoll, it's there forever, and it's a heavy metal pollutant. It's caused havoc in Iraq, and it will cause havoc in Kwajalein as well.
How many of these missiles have landed in this atoll?
You know, I don't know. I think in '83 was, or the early '80s was the beginning of testing, and they've had, so that's 30 years ago, and they've had between 4 and 9 a year. I don't know what that averages out, but it's a lot.
So that's tonnage of depleted uranium that's sitting there in the...
And they don't always drop them in the lagoon. Sometimes they target the islands there. It means
Is there any
land contamination.
Any attempt to clean this up?
Not that I know of. Not only is there no attempt to clean it up, but they did an environmental impact study that expired in 2010. And supposedly there wasn't going to be testing after the expiration of that. But they've continued to test, and they've done no further environmental impact study.
And there's no federal law requiring them to mitigate or undo this?
Apparently not. You know, the people of the Marshall Islands are at the mercy of the United States. They were made a protectorate of the United States after World War II. We immediately began above ground nuclear testing there, irradiated their lands and their people, and the people have had to fight. Today the fight still continues for compensation for the irradiation and the effect it's had on generations afterwards. Not to mention Bikini Atoll is still uninhabitable. So now we continue that irradiation with our ICBM tests. It's a crime against humanity in my view. That's why I feel passionate.
Is Vandenberg the only American rocket base that does this type of testing?
That tests intercontinental ballistic missiles. There's plenty of other kinds of nuclear missiles on the Trident submarines, the Aegis destroyers. Those are all tested out in the Pacific and the ocean. But
do they go to the same destination?
No. I don't know all the destinations. I don't think any of us know all the destinations of those tests. But they're shorter range. They're designed to be in the theater where they're to be used before they're deployed, whereas ICBMs are designed to be launched from the heartland of the United States to anywhere in the world.
And including, yes. Well, so the protest movement continues. In fact, on March 5th, you were both present, again, at the Vandenberg site.
Correct.
And tell us what happened. I understand, Bud, you were contacted by the authorities at B?
Well, one of the little female gendarme came up to me and said, "Hi, bud."
This is the Air Force military?
Yeah, yeah. And says, "How you feeling?" I says, "Well, as good as could be expected for somebody that only has 50% capacity with his heart." And she was, "Oh, well, try and get better," or some such words as that. So they're really the people that do this, for the most part, are very nice, right, Dennis?
Yeah.
They're very,
They have
very,
a pleasant affect about them.
yeah. Uh-huh.
But were you doing something that would be technically a violation of Vandenberg laws?
No, we were right out there on the open protest area with our signs, which are anti what our government is doing, not only in Vandenberg but around the world. And I think Dennis will tell you that that Vandenberg is only one aspect of it. That this would apply all commercial places and military bases throughout the country.
The issues that you're raising.
Yeah, Vandenberg is involved not just in ICBM testing. They launch satellites, and specifically the satellites that make operational the drones that we use to pretty much assassinate whoever we want around the globe without any judicial overview or even declaration of war. We fly over countries and drop our bombs, and those satellites are launched by Vandenberg, as well as the data from those satellites come back to Vandenberg. They have a
Oh, is that right?
they have a facility there called the Joint Space Operations Center, where all 4 branches of the military have equipment to receive the data from the satellites and then send that out to wherever the information is needed.
So the hope that you and the other demonstrators have is to bring public attention to the idea that the government, our government in our name, is engaging in these threatening and perhaps probably at least somewhat illegal activities in some areas. I mean, you might say all war is unethical and illegal, but some are specifically prohibited by international treaty, and they continue to go about this business without public awareness of what they're up to. Is that your intention to hope people understand this?
To bring attention and also not to be silent. Just not to. It's a personal issue. To not be silent when your government is involved in something dishonorable or immoral. I think for myself, it's important that all of us do that. We do have the right to free speech in this country.
We do. We are told we do.
Sometimes it gets whittled away.
Well, yeah, we'll get into this a little bit because the U.S. Supreme Court is about to consider some cases in which the question of free speech is going to be has been limited to by circumstance, time, place, and manner is a phrase they like to use. As you know, the court says, well, you have a right to free speech, but it can't be subject to regulations in time, place, and manner. And so, I mean, the most current one is the issue about people who are demonstrating outside of abortion centers or women's health centers, and that sort of thing, and how close can they get? Or the one historic that has always bothered me is this increasing restriction of public demonstrations outside of political conventions. We have this absurd thing where they just build these cages a mile and a half away from the GOP or the Democratic National Conventions, and they let you go and protest there, and nobody's watching, nobody cares. You look like a bunch of people in a cage. Bad. So I'm a little concerned about how the Supreme Court is going to allow further restrictions and on time, place, and manner abuse of free speech, and that's why I think your case was of interest to me the first time it came up. But anyway, so on March 5th, you managed to get arrested again. Is that right?
Yeah. So we have a vigil at Vandenberg the first Wednesday of every month, and so March 5th was the first Wednesday in March, and we went out exactly 1 week prior to that. The Supreme Court had made its ruling, So it was unclear how the base would respond to that ruling, but it became clear once we were out there.
They knew who you were.
About a half hour into it, yeah, they know who I am, and they came out and said, you know, you have to leave. Will you leave? And I said, well, I'm here for an hour. This is our vigil. I'm staying for the hour. And they said, okay, we'll put your hands behind your back. And so they arrested me, and they arrested a Jesuit priest who was out there, Father Steve Kelly. Both of us are on their list.
Banned list.
As am I.
As are you,
As am I.
but they don't arrest you.
Don't know why. It could be that they were concerned because one time when they arrested me, they butchered up my wrists with the handcuffs and had to call the medics to bandage me up. And
Do you have a sense that what they're engaged in is also symbolic? That this is more of a kabuki dance kind of thing, where you do your point, you're making your point by being there, and they're making their point by politely arresting people. Is there some ritualism about this?
I think the politeness is mutual. I think if someone being arrested is less than polite, that they would be less than polite as well. And I've seen that happen. I saw that happen with Bud when they tore up his wrist.
Yeah.
I saw that happen with Judy Everett, who they, in her late 80s, took her to the ground and knelt on her back. You know,
it's definitely not helpful for their position if they abuse, especially older folks and more sympathetic people. On their hand.
But I also think it's not symbolic in the sense that once the citation is prosecuted, you go before a judge. It's out of their hands and our hands. It's up to a judge, and we've seen judges who have seen our actions as symbolic, and then we've seen judges who see our actions as a threat to national security and want to treat it that way. So it may be kind of symbolic there at the front gate, but it kind of loses all the symbolism once it gets to court.
When you really actually have handcuffs on and you're in a courtroom, and what is the potential maximum penalty under this section?
It's a $5,000 fine and 6 months in prison.
And generally speaking, you've been through this many times. You say 15 convictions?
No,
18?
I've been arrested 15 times for just being on the highway with a sign. Of those 15 times, they only prosecuted the last 3 of them, which are the 3 convictions that ended up in the Supreme Court.
And was there a sentence that was imposed on the last conviction?
For all 3 of those convictions, the total sentence was $355 fine.
Total sentence.
Yeah.
It becomes very symbolic. Now,
yeah.
So on March 5th, you were back there again, as you would be.
Yes.
As you say, as a matter of conscience. And do you think that this is likely to push their buttons any further in terms of what they ask of the magistrate or what crime they prosecute?
Well, you know, if they decide to prosecute it and it goes before a magistrate, we still have the First Amendment argument,
right?
And it's also, by the time this reaches the Santa Barbara court, the magistrate, it will be in process in the Ninth Circuit Court. The same issue.
On the remand of the first conviction.
So it's unclear whether the Santa Barbara court would say, let's just postpone this till we get the decision from the Ninth Circuit. Would save everyone a lot of time and energy, but I don't know. We'll see.
Are you going to have a lawyer with you, Dennis?
Not in Santa Barbara. I have a lawyer at the Ninth Circuit.
Well, I know that. But in Santa Barbara,
no.
You just go up there.
Yeah, I would just represent myself.
Yeah, and basically you'll tell them, well, this is in front of the Ninth Circuit, and therefore something that is beyond you, and you shouldn't.
Well, as an attorney myself, or as a practicing attorney, I mean, there's this old maxim of the law that says, bad cases make bad law. The idea being that if you don't have good facts and good circumstances, and you go up on appeal and get a written opinion about it that is precedential, that's binding, it's good to have the best facts possible for your side
Sure.
in order to give them a chance to rule in your favor.
Yeah.
And to the contrary, when you have bad facts, even if the constitutional or legal principle is good, the bad facts can make it difficult for a court, or appellate court, to rule in your favor. Are you comfortable that on the case that's now being remanded back to the Ninth Circuit, that the facts available on that conviction are as good as they could be, or might you think about taking this one up to with maybe making a better record?
I think that the facts are as good as they could be, and more important, Erwin Chemerinsky, who's a real authority, thinks the facts are good,
that's
and
true.
he thinks will prevail.
Okay. Well, I'm reading the decision. There were two justices that gratuitously, what we call dicta, said, we want to note that the opinion we reached today does not does not reach the question of the First Amendment. This is only based on the definition of the boundaries of the base, the interpretation of the statute, and the litigants will possibly bring it back before us. Then another justice took it upon himself to say, phooey to you two. we don't say anything today about whether it's a First Amendment protected act or not. So as a reader of the tea leaves of the court, one might suspect that it's going to be hard to get a majority to recognize the First Amendment aspects of this. Do you have any sense of that?
My sense, and again, I take this from my attorney, but my sense is that we will prevail in the Ninth Circuit.
Yes.
And that the government will again petition the Supreme Court. But I think the Supreme Court will decline to hear the case a second time.
Because they don't want to reach the issue of the First Amendment?
I think they want to let the issue of the First Amendment, if the Ninth Circuit Court overturns the convictions based on the First Amendment, I think they would like to let that rest. Because they would do that because of the precedent of USA versus Flower, and I don't think they want to overrule Flower.
That's good. That's good feeling. We know that the U.S. Supreme Court has, this is the gossip of the law. There's a certain, in any profession, any business, there's a certain aspect to it that, but we don't believe that the U.S. Supreme Court under its present configuration has very much love for the Ninth Circuit under its configuration.
Right.
Anyway, good luck to you on your future efforts. I hope that the public pays attention to the work that you and Bud and the other protesters are there. Every Wednesday at 2 o'clock? First Wednesday.
Every first Wednesday of the month at 3:45.
At the gate across the gate from Vandenberg.
At the main gate of Vandenberg.
And anybody's welcome to come?
We park at the middle school across the street.
And there's nothing expected of them other than presence?
Pardon?
No, nobody's expected to be arrested or otherwise? Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you, Ali Adachak, Juanita Chatham, and Liz Burke for assisting in the back. And we look forward to another show soon, and maybe we report in the future about more success on your part.
So, thank you, Glenn.